Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety. I thought that was Warren Zevon.
It is Warren.
It's what's the one? It's the one. It's about a werewolf.
Werewolf from London.
Yeah, that's the only one I know. Probably.
He was. Oh God, you would love Warren Zevon. You really would. I'll give you some other thoughts about him, but it's, because he saw a werewolf of London drinking a pina colada at Trader Vic's. His hair was perfect.
Werewolves would have perfect hair. Like, remember when Jack Nicholson played one?
Mm-hmm. That was a really good movie.
Yeah, it's a real anomaly in the horror genre, because it's like set in the cutthroat world of book publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's an anomaly in his work, Nicholson's work too. I think it's a character like he's never played before. I mean, he played a good guy.
Yeah, well, and also somebody who's kind of.
He's always been good. He's been good guys sometimes, but I mean, like actually just a good person.
Yeah, and kind of like low energy type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, he's like, that's not his default setting. So it's I love Wolf.
Right.
I just saw The Last Detail with my dad for the first time, and that was fantastic.
The Last Detail. I don't even know what that is.
That's the one. It's Hal Ashby directed it, and it's a Robert Towne script, and it's about these two Navy guys who have to take a guy. They're taking Randy Quaid to prison for 20 years because he stole like $20 out of some like charity. They call their superior officer the big man or something like that, and it's like the big man's wife is like the head of some charitable foundation. And anyway, this naval officer is a kleptomaniac, so he has a problem with compulsively shoplifting wherever he goes, and so he happened to shoplift the wrong $20, and it's about this road trip, basically, like Jack Nicholson and this other guy take Randy Quaid on. And it's a little bit like it's a Scent of a Woman type thing, where it's like a tour of pleasures before they have to send this guy to jail for the rest of his life. And anyway, it's like Jack Nicholson circa Cuckoo's Nest. So he's like at the peak of his powers, and it's really good. You should turn your video on.
I should turn my video on?
I only see the default.
Oh. I thought we were staring at each other. There it is. Okay. Here I am.
Hey, good morning, or
good morning.
Late morning for you, early morning for me.
Well, I appreciate you doing a little bit early. I just figured, that way I won't be rushed at the end or
no problem.
I'm not sure what we're doing. See, it's unusual for me to be nervous about work in my old age, but it's like, this is something that I've been wanting to. I've been thinking about doing this stuff ever since I knew I could record myself on some of this stuff. And I'm confident as a writer, but not necessarily, sort of as a performer. It's like, and I don't work off scripts good. So it's like, and then with COVID, I've done a few of these things. The Berlin thing was the last one, where I'm just basically, you see the people out there in the little gallery, but it's like, everything I do when I'm presenting has always been interactional. It's like whether people are talking to me or not. I mean, I'm chatting them up, but it's like, so I'm still at a loss when I don't have the feedback of some kind of interaction. So one of the things I was thinking was maybe if we did this as more of a conversational thing, this would bring that into it a little bit. So, but
I love that.
I'm wide open. I want you to hear that I'm wide open to your creative input to these things, and tell me what you think is going to be good for the what we're creating here. And do not worry. I mean, I am legitimately insecure about doing this kind of thing just on my own, where I'm just trying to present some of my stuff. So if and I'm not trying to say that so that it would make it harder for you to tell me something's not working. It would actually be fine with me, because it would just say, you'd say, okay, let's try that a different way, because I know the information's fine. I just need to, this is just not one of my strong suits, I don't think, in terms of presenting it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm just curious because, Alan's putting his book out, and, what's the frontier for you these days in terms of like your work and, your practice? And, I think that you're doing some work that seems to dovetail a bit with, the work that he's doing. And of course, you guys are collaborating on a book that's coming up. But yeah, I mean, where does your imagination go these days when it comes to, helping people, which is like the baseline, of your practice?
It's what we do for a living. That's right. It's well, one of the things you mentioned is one of the things that's really high on my list right now, is that we are working on the new book. It's the Emotional Sobriety One Day at a Time, and that's, so we're writing these little thought for the days and reflections, and then that's my favorite kind of writing. I mean, it's like I've always said that I've written books, and I've done build-a-books, which build-a-books are the easier ones to do, but because they're sort of almost one page or a couple of page entries that you can kind of mix and match. And they're also the kind of easier, I call them books for people who don't read. It's like, so I have some books like that where it's like somebody can just open it up any place and maybe get something out of that. And that's kind of what I'm hoping that we can do with this feature for our podcast with Emotional Sobriety, is just give little, I'm calling it right now in my head, nutshell workshop kind of thing, just because one of the things that I have been through in my experience in working in workshops with people is I've gone through a couple of little moments of crisis where it's where I get insecure because I think this is just too fucking simple. It's eventually I've adopted the term. This work is what I do is offensively simple. It's like, and so beware that you don't make the mistake that I've made, which is to just rush past it because it seems so simple. And it's, and a friend of mine pointed out to me, Tom, the first book you ever wrote was called Simple Truth. So, you might be, clued into that, but I think, what I want to be able to do is take those offensively simple ideas, and because I believe so much in concepts, what you've heard me say this before, concepts are useless unless you transfer them or transform them into practice. And so that's, we give a lot of information in the podcast. I mean, there's a lot of content, I think, from both Alan and myself, but I think the idea of having something that is briefer, right to the point, and just give somebody really almost a homework assignment, if you want it, kind of thing to work on, is kind of the goal I have for doing this kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And why do you think, how to explain the reluctance about simplicity? Or do people just kind of assume that if something's simple, it's
yeah, I think they might, but no, I would own that for myself. I would say no, that's a remnant, that's a leftover from the days of when I was much harder on myself. Is the idea that's, those, we often say these voices in our head, these little guys in our committee, in this metaphor, in the intrapersonal process, it's like they don't go away. We change our relationship with them, and that's one of the things this exercise I want to share today is about too. Is to begin to change that relationship, but they're still around, and it's like, and there's just some things that there are things we're insecure about. If somebody says, you and I have had a conversation. I've always thought I have a weak chin. I had a bad experience. I had plastic surgery before it was cool when I was in high school, because my orthodontist said he needed a chin implant, so it's like, because I had a receding chin, and it's like, but of course, I have that, and that was good. But it's like I've always been insecure about it. So that's the kind of thing here. So if we're talking about, and as I've said this, I think to you before, Patrick, that if I think I'm probably more confident about what I write than what I present myself. So it's like that's the sort of the growing edge for me still, even at my age, is to get more confident with just being able to put this stuff out there by just saying it. And as you know, I don't work well from scripts, so I try that. So that's not work. So sometimes I just need to do what I'm hoping to do here is just a little piece of what I do. It's been a long time since I've been on the road doing the workshops, but I always love doing that stuff. I'm not worried. I don't get insecure about that. And what I do with that is I just call it, just sort of semi-organized babbling. I just get together with a group of people, and big, medium or small, and we collaborate. It's like it's a big group therapy thing.
Well, you're demonstrating how it's good to kind of go to the area you're uncomfortable in, and drop yourself in the deep end, and that's the best way to kind of grease the axles to get things moving in a certain direction. And you do have a pretty cool radio voice, though. I like your accent. We don't have accents here in California.
No, I know you don't. I've always loved radio. I mean, it's like I just have, some of my favorite times in radio were back in the day of actual radio, where you go to the radio studio and do these interviews, and there were some around here in Nashville. I do them on the road some too, but it's like around here in Nashville, there were a couple of guys that would get on the late night talk show. I can't even remember the show. It was WTN here in Nashville, and we would do like 2 or 3 hours of call-in stuff to me as a therapist, and people would call in. It's my favorite compliment. I sometimes hesitate to say this because it can maybe not sound that great about me, but it's like I promised everybody was safe and sound at the end of this whole process. But my favorite compliment as a radio person with doing that kind of call-in stuff was a producer at the end of a show. We had done 3 hours and taken several call-ins, with 2 very intense ones, and she said, you handled 2 suicidal callers tonight, and you kept it entertaining the entire time. And it's like, there's just something about that I just have always remembered. And I thought, well, that wasn't that wasn't my intention. I really wasn't trying to say, well, I can't afford to help this person, I need to be more entertaining. But it's like just the idea that we could actually pull that off and have listeners who could be interested in what we were doing and actually help people.
That's a high wire act for sure.
That's what it felt like. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I love doing that. So back on now that we're doing podcasts and stuff, I do feel like, I guess it is today's radio, really.
Yeah.
As much as anything else.
I was going to ask, when you think of your mind's committee, the different voices that negotiate, for control, what do you picture? Yeah. I picture kind of like the table in Dr. Strangelove. Like an evil table where they're all.
Yep. I've got 2 images that are predominant for me. One is a big conference table. And I never thought about the Strangelove thing, but that's okay. That works. And then the other I have, and the one I draw when I'm showing this to clients, is just a circle. I'm not a very good artist, so I just draw little circles to represent all these different parts of myself, and I leave the center part blank. And then what I do with that, I'm going to try to describe the visual, here is then I describe what I call pinball consciousness, which is if you don't have a center to that circle, if you don't have a hub of the wheel, what happens is I get my little marker out there, and I go from one across to the other, and then back to another one, back to that same one I came from, then to another one, and I'm just bouncing all between all of these inside that circle. I'm just bouncing back and forth all over the place, maybe getting stuck between 2. And my point being is that the reason people get a little nervous when I start talking about intrapersonal process and that the nature of consciousness is multiple, not singular, which is the very beginning of my work was that. It's like it's to dispel the myth of singularity and say, the mind is not singular, it's multiple. And people can get kind of nervous when they hear that. But my point about that is to say, only when we don't have that center part, which is that authentic self, that decision maker that we talk about on the podcast so much. It's like all these other parts can be certainly parts of us, but they're not really who we are. They're more, the ones that are most active are those coping mechanisms, those defenses that we have. And other parts are just parts of our, like we talk about inner child work or things like that, parts of us that are just kind of lost or clueless and this kind of stuff. But we really lack a leader is in that scenario. So my image, going back to what you're asking about, the image I have is where I will draw the circle inside the circle, and then draw lines from each one of the other characters to say, okay, here's how this works. Everything comes through me now. If I'm the decision maker, and there's a lot of different words. We use authentic self, we use decision maker. Sometimes recovery voice is one of the ones I use a lot. But wisdom voice is another. It's whatever, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's like I'm a big believer that we get too caught up in language in this stuff sometimes. And so, it's the old Buddhist saying of don't be sure to not mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the language that we go like, oh, is this that part or that part? It's a metaphor, man. We can change it any way we want to. It's like
just tools,
just as long as it's working for you. Yeah. And I tell people when I'm doing training workshops, it's like, and if it's not working, it's like, change it, make up your own right there on the spot. I don't care if I think this is the smartest thing in the world and I'm teaching it to you now. It's like, if it's not working, throw it out, find something else, give it, I always say give things a good chance. But back to that image is that the hub of the wheel image is one that basically says, everything comes through me. So, and that brings us back to that Viktor Frankl thing from the wonderful psychiatrist who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, where Alan and I talk about that pause that's right there after that first thought, or sometimes I'll say, the shortcut to my version of this is first voice, second voice, and the first voice is in these situations is not us. It's just it's a message, it's a learned program, whatever. The second voice is us, and the first thing that comes to us is it's not just this, but do we agree or disagree? So to use a very simple example, if I'm dealing with a self-condemning part, that voice for me would say, I hate you, or it basically just says in my head, just fuck you, and has that snarl to it that, that is very clear that it means what it says. And it's like, and so that's actually not something that's a question. So it's like, it was agree or disagree. No, it is about agree or disagree, because I need to reject, what I need to do is I need to reject that. I've learned to reject that. And the way I reject it is by saying, fuck you. And so that's the internal voice. That's one of those maybe offensively simple things, but the idea is, fuck you, no, fuck you. And then that's it. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to change that part. I'm not going to try to change any of these parts, but it's just like the alcohol. If the alcoholism says, let's drink, or this is a okay reason to do that, then basically what do? What do any of us do who are in recovery? We learn to disagree. We disagree and disobey, and that's what recovery is. And it's like, we know that behaviorally. It's also, but I also include the mental process of this, the conversations we have in our head, the intrapersonal process. I consider that really behavioral in that sense, because it really is, it is actual communication that's going on inside our head. As a matter of fact, one of the things I'll send you to, so we can maybe put a link to it, with the notes with this is I have just a one-page thing that just describes pretty concisely what the intrapersonal process is that I use. It might, it's like it's a little, some of it may be a little bit different than what Alan does, but it's like a lot of it's very similar. But it just kind of lays out what that is, and it really is those internal codependent relationships, because that's really what this is. It's like I'm giving my power away to, like it's whatever this should monster thinks of me determines how I feel about myself. It's like, No, it's like, I don't need to, what I care about what you think of me. And if you have a negative thought about me, then we're close enough, we can talk about it, then let's do that. But if you're just judging me, it's like my job is in an emotional sobriety frame is basically not to not care, but to not let that control me, to not let that, because I think a lot of times people make the mistake of thinking, oh, you're telling us not to care what other people think. It's like, no, I mean, we all know people who don't give a shit what other people think. And I don't want to be those guys.
It's just one voice in the committee, I think that's the idea, right? Is you disaggregate yourself and you can kind of maintain some distance between yourself and the input.
Right. And it is very much like I was saying, it's very much, it really mirrors the interpersonal world too. It's like the same, I'm just, one of the things I'm fascinated about working with this stuff internally is that everything we're doing in this intrapersonal process is about relationships with myself. Even if it's a message, like you say, oh, I got that from my Uncle John. It's like, okay, well, we're going to mark that. We're going to put that. We may even put that in the experiential piece that we're doing. But what we're going to be dealing with is the internal version of that message, because it's the internal version of that, not your actual Uncle John, that is the problem. It's the satellite of those parental messages that we've got. And so the idea is people will get so stuck in thinking, I need to, I have to get my dad or my mom. I have to get this from my dad or my mom, or I need them to understand something like that. It's like, well, you may want them to understand that, and that would be a wonderful thing, but you don't have to have them do that in order for you to be better, because you already, as an adult, and as Robert Subby, who wrote Lost in the Shuffle, says, as children we're victims, as adults we're volunteers. And I love that idea that it's not saying it'll become our fault that it happened when we get to be adults, but it is our responsibility to change it.
That's such a mountain, is recognizing that Uncle Bob is, there's Uncle Bob, and then there's what we're deciding to do about our reaction to Uncle Bob's antics.
And the Uncle Bob satellite is so much more the issue. But the most important about that is that's where the solution lies. Not and literally just the same as interpersonally. Not because we're going to change the internal version of, but we're going to change our relationship to it. It's like it takes practice. And that's one of the reasons that we practice this separation thing, is it takes practice, and and I always want people to know that one of the most important things about practice is repetition. It's like, if you're going to learn to do anything else, if you're learning to play a musical instrument, if you're learning a sport, if you're learning anything, it's like you don't do it one time and then you got it right. It's like if you want to master it, you have to do it over and over and over and over again. And and that's the way it works. It's like you have to, and I've seen people so often just get insights from a book or listen to a podcast or something like that, and then they feel good. It works kind of in their head, their thinking, and then they become disappointed later because it's not sticking. Well, it's not sticking, and this is good news. It's not like in your face confrontation, but it is a bit of a confrontation of saying, no, we have to actually get this behaviorally specific, even if it's a thought process. Behaviorally specific is the way I think about it, is what is it that you need to be saying in response to the Uncle Bob satellite? It's like, what's going to work for you? Not to change Uncle Bob, but to change your position. And it's like, and I want people to know, like anything else, when you're learning something new, you're not going to be any good at it at first. It's like, it's okay. It's like you're going to, Uncle Bob says A, B, and C, and you're going like, no, what's true about me is X, Y, and Z. It's like the first time you say that back, it's not going to feel very strong. You're going to say, well, say it anyway. What's the truth? And it's like, ultimately, we're not going to stay in the conversation. We do talk back to these characters in our heads, but it's a matter of feeling your own power. Sometimes it's really good just to be able to, well, I call it putting the fuck you in the right place, rather than at myself, at the message in my head that is basically And that's the other thing I want people to know. It's not really Uncle Bob. It's not really your mom or dad. So you're not hurting anybody, because people get really nervous and disloyal. They feel they're disloyal or something like that if they're talking about family. It's like, no, this is an internal process, and it's not about blaming. It's it's about taking responsibility and making changes.
Mm.
Or my first sponsor in AA used to say, blame's a good place to visit. You just don't want to live there.
Mm.
And so I
Love
like that
that.
idea, because sometimes we need to go through that process where it just feels it's not really about blaming. It's about getting it off of ourselves.
Mm.
You know what? I didn't do this, you know?
I have a friend who just last night I found out he's having to visit his father in the hospital a year after cutting him out of his life because he discovered that his father was molesting his sister.
Mm.
And to have to navigate those emotional spaces requires, I think, a level of fortitude that, I'm certainly not at. And, I think I'm at the stage in my striving towards some level of emotional sobriety where I just try and put some space and time between the stimuli and when I'm responding to the stimuli, to try not to be as reactive as I used to be, and to try to,
That's
I guess
huge.
just be more judicious and recognize, the different voices and the faces on the committee before,
well, it's when in doubt, take a beat. And it really is that. It's like so often, if we look back at our history, why do we get ourselves in? It's this impulse that these and reflexes, really. I mean, and the idea is, and that's what the separation thing does. So it's and by the way, I want to say this about you and anybody else who's listening. It's like when you see your friend doing that, and you go, I'm not there. I couldn't do that. It's like I've been in places several times in my life where I've looked at somebody else who's going through something, and I see something that they're doing that I believe is admirable and difficult as hell, and I say, I couldn't do it. And it's like, and I have one really good friend. I remember she told me one time, she said, and it was about her interaction with her father as he was dying. And I said, well, that's never going to happen in my family. And she said, you don't know. She said, I would have said the same thing. And sure enough, I flash forward a little while, and I was having this conversation with my own dad where we were talking about stuff that I would have never thought possible. And so one of the things I tell people is first of all, what I remember reading from Christopher Reeve's first book called Still Me, is basically, people would tell him, how could you do what you did after your accident? How do you keep going on and do it? And he said, I wouldn't have thought I could do that. He said, I there was no way I would have believed I would have wanted to live, or he said there were times where I didn't, but it's like, but he said, you cannot, and he just said that from such a place of authority where he was, to say, you can't know until you're there. So I think that we owe it to ourselves to hold on to that and realize that those people, we're watching people go through stuff before us, and they're our role models. And it doesn't mean we have to be just like that person or that person. Doesn't mean you'd make the same choices, but it's like we're collecting these role models. We've talked about recently my friend who was dying in Dallas with pancreatic cancer, and he died about a week ago. And and he's one of those guys that and I'm still texting him. I don't stop texting people because they're dead. It's like his wife is clicking comments. So I think she's getting the message. But one of the things I was saying to him, because through my grief process, by continuing to text with him, was that just talking about what I saw, how much courage I saw in him dealing with as much pain as he dealt with, and listen to him when I would talk to him, and then when we just texted, and his concern for other people, was still so prevalent. It was so much there. And I just, and I mean, pain brings about natural narcissism. There's a certain level of pain at any time for anybody, one of us. There's a threshold at which, fuck you, I've got to go, or if you're, take me to the hospital, whatever it is. But it's like the idea when somebody's going through something that is that chronic and longstanding, and in this case where he understood that it's not going to end with him getting better. It's amazing how different parts of us in those situations will come forward. talk about different aspects of our personality, but it's like, and I look at that and I go, and what I do nowadays is I think, okay, if he can do it, I can do it, and I just try to remember that.
I took my cake for my 3-year sobriety anniversary recently, and what the thought that keeps coming back to me is that I didn't know when I getting sober and going to the meetings and kind of getting my shit together that I was kind of doing a dry audition for the stresses of the pandemic that was soon to fall on top of all of us. And just thinking about, like, if I hadn't, begun working on myself and trying to really grapple with life's terms, wouldn't have been any kind of shape to weather the life changes and just all the kind of intense, we all went through that. We know what it was. So, so I guess we're always kind of auditioning or preparing for some, depths that we haven't plumbed yet.
Well, and we're also, if we're paying attention, we're also always learning. And what you just did just then was one of the things, we talk about living. So much is about focusing on the present, being in the moment, not living in the past or the future. But what you just talked about there is a beautiful, Alan quotes this a lot because he loves my little nutshell that says, learn from the past and get the hell out of there. It's, but you just described a wonderful way that is very healthy and very much a present tense experience to kind of go back and review what the last year has been and what you've done. It's like, because what we're doing is we're reviewing that and we're gathering up what we've learned from that. And part of what you learn from that is about your own strength and about your own integrity. You go like, okay, and the humility's right there. I get it. You're going, I don't know that I could have done it if I hadn't had the head start with recovery. And what I would say is, but we don't know that either. It's like we can't compare it to a parallel universe, we're not in, but I get what you're saying. But it's like, I love the idea that and I'm encouraging people that I work with a lot of times that we do a little time travel exercise every so often and just go back and say, let's because we habituate, human beings habituate to anything, any we get used to it really too easily. And so it's good to go back and kind of surprise our younger selves in a way to say, what I'll just say is, like, if you went back and told you from 2 years ago that you just did this and this and this and thought this, what would that version of you say? And a lot of times the answer for me has been, well, he would say, you're full of shit and I don't know who you are, but this is a trick. It's like, you're lying to me. And it's like, and I think that's so important for people to see that, even though we just do it by putting one foot in front of the other, over a period of time, we're accomplishing big things in this process, big things.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, generally I'm pretty deadlocked in terms of seeing things about human beings that inspires me, and then seeing things about human beings that just pulls me into the doldrums, but I mean, it's like, it's dead even. And that struggle's always taking place. And I always try and give as much, stage to the positive as I can, because that keeps me in right action. And,
that's also one of the things where we're listening to Alan talk about his angle on emotional sobriety. It helps me too when you talk about those because that's quite a split when we're looking at, if you and I, and we've had conversations about this, where we're panning back and looking at the big picture of humankind and or just even our maybe politically for our nation. It's like, it's even kind of a bit of a understatement to say some of it is just heartbreaking, but it does include that, and it's like discouraging as hell. And that's one of the things where I've really tried to remember the things that we've talked about is in the podcast thing, which is that pay attention to what are the expectations. It's like, okay, well, if the expectation isn't, it's about, it's about us. It's like the expectation that is dangerous for me is people who are, that I believe are really messed up in their thinking. They're really are really causing tremendous amount of problems and turmoil in our world, have to change in order for me to be okay. It's like, well, that's not going to work if I'm going to be okay, and it's like, I mean, and to me, somehow that's even more prevalent. That's more obvious to me. And I don't think it's any different for me than it is for you. But there's always something about the time frame when at my age, at 67, it's like I'm going like, okay, well, what's the truth? I just go through the little thing saying, well, the world's going to be messed up when the day you exit, even if you're going to live to be 90 years old. It's like, it's like Rosanna Dana on Saturday Night Live used to say, it's always something. I think I'm quoting her correctly. I hope I am. So, yeah, I think that, but I think the idea of being sure, this is a place of multiplicity really applies, because to me, being sure that I stay in, even when I can feel the pain that I can actually feel I feel in my chest when you talk about, the dark side of what we're seeing and what we know about human beings. Is that my awareness of that also needs to make room for the good side, the good stuff, and I'm finding a way to, it needs to coexist, because that's what this is about. It's about inclusion, not exclusion. And what we have discovered, what we know doesn't work, is personally, or in the broad picture of human interaction, it doesn't work to disown all the negative aspects of yourself and project it, because you would project it onto other people, and then they're the bad guys and you're the good guy. The power struggle that has to take place, whether it be about addiction, whether it be about how I feel about myself, and whether it be all the way out into the global politics, has to be, we need to find a way to make room for all of that inside of ourselves. And that's where we're going to find peace. You can't find it by projecting it all out there.
That makes sense. Yeah, well, that tracks, with my limited experience. I liked this Cornel West quote I heard the other day, sing the blues so you don't succumb to the blues.
I love it.
Yeah. Also, be ruthless with institutions and be kind to people. Those are the two nutshells that.
I love that.
Yeah, those are good ones.
And boy, those are both very important. It's like, yeah.
Well, are we doing now? I just want to be clear. Are we doing the workshop right now, or did you have a thing that you wanted to, throw into the mix?
No, what you did is you first of all, you helped me. You did a beautiful job of helping me deal with my anxiety that I began with, and I touched on the stuff, but the workshop itself, if we were going to do that, and like I said, this may be a whole different thing. I love this conversation. Is what I was going to do with that. And let me just ask you this: would you want to do that as a part of this conversation, or would you want to do that as a separate short piece?
Let's integrate it into the conversation. I think that would be great.
Okay.
Listeners would probably appreciate it.
Okay. Well, what I was going to do is I was just going to go through something that's it's kind of this is the most organized thing you'll ever see me do. I actually have some notes about it.
I'm excited.
See if I can pull it off. It's like, Alan refers to this, the term he would come up with this is differentiation. Alan, I always say that Alan pays more attention, and he really enjoyed his education and paid attention. I was drinking all through school. So I came up with simpler words, and my word here is just simply separation. And it's like, so what we're talking, I'll describe it this way. When I've done workshops, when I used to do workshops on the road, and I guess I'll do them again soon, is I would often begin by asking the audience, I say, how many of you talk to yourselves? And, people who come to see these workshops, most people would probably raise their hands. But then, of course, the joke, the cleverness I think I have there is I say, okay, those of you who didn't raise your hands, how many of you just said, do I talk to myself? And it's like that usually gets a laugh, and we realize that so we all talk to ourselves. That's the main thing I want to say. That's how we think. we talk to ourselves, we ask questions, we answer questions, we do all of this. What we need to do is instead of worry about whether we're talking to ourselves or not, is we need to know that we do, and we need to get better at it. And one of the ways you need to get better at it is you have to be able to identify the characters. And, and I always, like I've said before, always caution, always beware. If it gets confusing, remember it's a metaphor. You can change it any way you want to. It's like, but I have I haven't even thought about this, but I have a sheet. I'll send this to you for at least for your edification, and maybe we'll even mention it again and put it out for the listeners. It's like, and it's actually a conversation between a person and their critic, their inner bullshit critic. But it's like you're looking at a play or a dialogue that's written, but there's no designation of characters. So it's just a bunch of contradictory lines.
Like Waiting for Godot.
Yeah. Yes. It's like you're good, but it's like, you're a piece, I'm a piece of, and before we switch to pronouns, so it goes, say, I'm a piece of shit. No, I'm not a piece of shit. I'm a good person. No, you're not a good, I'm not a good person. And it's just confusing as hell. And then I take the exact same sentences on the second page and I divide them up into this conversation between me or one person and another. And one is saying, so we do the first thing that's about separation, which a client of mine years ago just said she called it pronoun therapy. It's like, so what we're going to do is something that one of the offensively simple things is we're going to change the pronoun. We're going to take the I pronoun away from what we see as that the internal culprit, basically the saboteur. It's like, so if it's okay, so if it's let's just do the simple thing, alcohol. So if it's about that, then all of a sudden from here on, as I'm going to write these things down, I'm going to, if the alcoholism is talking, then it has to speak to me in the second person, which means Tom, you. In other words, rather than I need a drink, it has to be Tom, you need a drink. And that leaves, and this creates the separation. If we're audio here, but I put my hands together, clamp my hands together, and then just take my hands and separate them just a few inches, and say, okay, now you have enough differentiation there. See, Alan's having a good effect on me. I'm calling it differentiation now. It's differentiation, separation, to where the problem definition changes. And this is the key. And this changes this part. I don't have any problem. I don't feel embarrassed about it being offensively simple, because I've seen it happen again and again. And I see it happen in my life when I forget it and remember it. It changes everything, because now the problem definition is not the fact in this example that I have alcoholism or that I have a message that says drink. It is the problem is that I tend to agree and obey. So that the alcohol says drink, and I say yes and go, and do that. Now, before I have the separation, I'm not aware of that conversation at all. That's all. In other words, before it really is, the best way to describe that is possession. I am possessed by this. So it has the I pronoun. It takes over. It says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. But when the separation happens, and we're going to be able to do this with inner critics, with other sabotaging voices, but with the separation, the problem definition becomes agreeing and obeying. So so we have a goal, which is what I mentioned it earlier, is to learn to disagree and disobey. And it's like, so it's actually this inner rebellion that we're going to do. We're going to stand up to these voices. And it's like this is a beautiful example of what I would say about the concept does nothing for us without practice. First of all, we have to get as clear as we can about what those messages are for each individual. It's like, my messages are not your messages. So that's one of the processes we go through. But once you do that, then you have to begin to look at where am I going to start? How am I going to speak back? So once you can get to that place, you have that separation, and at this point, what I would say is that's kind of where we would find an end point for the workshop, the first workshop, because there's more about responding. But what I always teach people is they very often will be kind of disappointed that that what's going to happen is that they're going to become with this exercise, they're going to become more aware of how they're messed up, but there's not a solution in it yet. I want, go like, but the idea is awareness is so important here. It's like, because people will say, so I'll send them away from a first session, for instance, or in a workshop, they'll break into groups and say, okay, so write, I just say the easiest way to do it at first is just 2 columns. Just write the messages of the negative messages that you're getting, whatever that doesn't have to be alcohol, it doesn't have to be anything. It's negative messages, and be sure you take the I pronoun away. You write it in the second person, Tom, you, or Patrick, you, and it's a lot of times they're expressed in rhetorical questions, like if they're just generally insulting questions, like a lot of us have, they'll be like, Patrick, why are you that way? It could be something as innocuous as that, but inside us, you say, okay, what does that feel like? Oh, it's deeply shaming. It's like, so some of these guys are very blatant and they cuss and scream and holler like mine has, but others are kind of, but the main thing is we're listening for and feeling the spirit of the message. And then on the other column, you're putting over there, what's my response? And this is the key. What you're going to find when you're doing this, if you've never done this before, what you're going to find is the response is going to be what I call a yes position. It's going to be, people think, oh, well, I'm not doing it right because I'm not disagreeing. It's like, we don't expect you to disagree right now. That would be ridiculous. I mean, you wouldn't need any of this if you were already doing that. So the hard part is, as you know, sometimes we just have to sit with the difficulty, and the difficulty there is this, and it doesn't mean you can't go ahead and not pick up the drink or not fully buy. You may begin now by having this conversation, not buy into the fact that, or the way I used to say it is I got to the place before I got to where, when it would say you're a total fucking idiot, that I got to the place where I found some reasonable doubt and could actually get to the place where I said, well, maybe, possibly, I may not be entirely a total fucking idiot. And it's like people go like, well, what's that? It's like, oh, that's progress.
Yeah.
At the time, it's like just a possibility that might be wrong, because
inject a little doubt.
Yeah, because that's one of the weirdest things about these inner saboteurs is they speak with such authority. They speak and it's actually one of the fascinating things to me about doing this work is because here we are, people who have, and I know this about you as well as me, is long histories of massive self-doubt, but we have these characters in our head in this metaphor that never experience it. They never have a bad day and say you're a piece of shit, but consider the source. I could be wrong. There's none of that. It's like, I don't know how that works, but what I do know is that what I believe, I should say, is that tells me that's not a part of your authentic self.
Right. They're just phantoms.
That's a learned program. It's like, it's one of the reasons that when we get to other kinds of therapy where they talk about different parts, when they say, oh, you got to integrate that and love that part, and go like, no, you don't, and everybody, you can do this in lots of different ways, but in this particular metaphor system, there are parts we're going to discover that are parts of our authentic self, and there are parts that are, and I love your word where you just said they're phantoms. It's like, that's beautiful. It's like, it's because they're really just recorded messages from a program that has been installed in there in some way, and in sometimes different ways. But it's like, no, we can ultimately, I want people to know, once you separate from that, you can ultimately reject that, and you can continue to reject it. We can't get rid of it. I don't know how to get rid of that stuff. The stuff fades. It's sort of the irony of that is, when does it go away? It goes away when you stop needing it to go away, when you don't give a shit. It's like, it's basically stalker psychology. Don't get any feedback to the stalker is positive feedback. If somebody's calling you on a regular basis, stalking you, and I say, don't answer the phone at all. Don't ever answer the phone when it calls. and then you wait 6 months, but then you just are upset that day and you pick up the phone to say fuck you. It's like what the stalker just learned, it takes 6 months to get your attention. And so the idea is now it's going to be longer than that. So what we teach people to do is to begin to divest their energy from this stuff. And at first we do, and I can explain that stuff later if people have questions too, but we do interaction with these things, but it's not a matter of trying to change it. It's a matter of differentiating who you are versus that character, because a lot of times what we know is we know more about those negative characters than we know about ourselves, because we've been underneath that. We're the ones that are possessed by that. So we get to that place, and any of us addicts know that feeling of, when you take away things, we go, oh shit, now what?
Yeah.
Who am I now? And this happens throughout the process because this is stuff we thought was our identity, and it's not. So that's the way I started, is have people write that stuff down as an exercise, and then share it with somebody they trust, and begin the process of even before you start to try to fight back, just be aware of the problem, which is I'm in a relationship inside my own mind in which I am codependently attached. I am agreeing and obeying with messages that are not true. And so that brings up, so I'll wrap this piece up with the question that I ask people a lot of times, is make a list of beliefs that you have that are not true. Make things you really believe and it's not true, because those are those messages, that I am a total complete piece of shit. It's like, believe it? Yeah, believe it. It's like, is it true? Nope.
The beginning of this process of understanding for me was, I think it was Eckhart Tolle, years ago. You are not your thoughts. You are the one listening to your thoughts. And I mean, yes. That blew my mind when very simple, but also very, because I was a person who was just like living entirely in this imaginary world of my head that was really, tough to navigate, especially when you've got addiction issues.
Right. Well, and the other piece about that, it's beautiful, and that's that's it in a nutshell too. It's like you're not your thoughts, you're the one listening to the thoughts. And what we're adding here is that you're the guy responding to the thoughts. It's like so what are you going to do with that? And it's like, and what we get to is a lot of times we get to the place where what we're doing with a lot of the negative saboteur thoughts is nothing. It's one of my favorite exercises to direct people in, sometimes as they get farther down into the recovery, is what I call quiet defiance. It's like, and that's just where, if you can imagine, we're having a conversation, imagine for a moment that my alcoholism is sitting there next to me, and something that goes on, and he interrupts and says something to me about, well, this, because of this and this and this, you guys talking about people being horrible, and you had your friend die and everything. It's like, it's a good day to have a drink. And so the quiet defiance would be, I would pause for a moment, just glance to the side, look at him, and then come right back to the conversation and go, okay, what were you saying? And so it's like, it becomes a matter of, I'm acknowledging for myself that this is there. I'm not hiding from it. I'm not running from it. It's going like, and it's almost like a little silent, thanks for sharing. Not surprising, that, because that's the answer you have for everything. Who comes, I call
that is his only answer.
That's his only, he is a one-trick pony, man.
One hit wonder. Yeah.
Let's use something. Let's get high. Or as Tally says on South Park, well, we just get a little high.
Tally. God, I love that show. Still on.
I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Those guys got the last laugh from their high school.
Yeah. I mean, that was, the mundanity of like their Colorado upbringing, really did a number on them. Which I just love that. I love that that's something so vibrant can be spun out of, just a real, such a nothing early chapter.
Right. Absolutely. I've just started reading Jack Handy's novel. Did you know Jack Handy wrote a novel?
No, I didn't know that.
The deep thoughts from, he has a.
I remember that from SNL. Yeah.
Yeah. He did deep thoughts and did a lot of those books, but it's like literally I'm lying in bed last night and it's like, and I read these little promos for it and it's talking about people saying they laugh out loud. It's like, I'm laughing and I'm just laughing out loud. He's just so funny. It's like, it's just, I mean, every page is just hilarious. It's called what is it called? Something about the stench of, I think it's called The Stench of Honolulu.
That sounds like a Roger Corman movie from, the 60s or something. Yeah.
It might be. That might be a good topic. Yeah. So.
Well, this was wonderful.
Well, thanks. And thanks for helping me with this.
Yeah. Well, it goes both ways. And yeah. And, I'm going to get this on YouTube for our audience and as well as our other platforms. And, we're both looking forward to Alan's return. I'm sure he'll have a lot of stories to tell us about, his transition to, not Philadelphia, but somewhere in Pennsylvania, right? He's
it's
teleporting.
To Doylestown. But when he landed, I think they landed in Philadelphia. It's like, this might be a text that he sent to both of us. I can't remember. It probably was both of us. But the thing I think he let us know first was that he had his first piece of pizza.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get that text.
Did you not get that? Oh, I feel special. It's like, yeah, he had landed. I think I'd asked him a question about something, and he said he landed in Philadelphia, and he had already had his first piece of pizza. It's like, all right, he's going to be okay.
Well, I'm still hoping for that. We can get that TikTok video going of him jogging up the Rocky Steps and doing the.
Oh, we need that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And
we'll see about that.
If I get there, I'll do one of me crawling up. It's like, I love the ending of Rocky Balboa where they show all the people, all the tourists and everything running the steps.
Well, what's fun about that movie in particular is that when he gets up the steps, he's holding a little dog in his free arm. So it's, I
know it's punchy.
Punchy, right? Yeah. I'll see you soon. We'll get another one of these going.
Let me know and I'll let people know about it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. Take care.
Bye.
Tend your life, tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.